Okay, first things first, and I'll just comment on this. Modern helicopters today, mechanically, you still should set up for switchless inverted. That is, set up the servos and the mechanics of the helicopter so that zero pitch is at center, positive 9, 10, 11, whatever you want, and negative 9, 10, 11, whatever you want, and get it set up. Additionally, the way I'm going to show this program will work on a CCPM heli or regular, single servo or any type of swash, because the way I do this isn't really messing with that part of the radio. So this will work on CCPM and etc. So set up the heli for switchless, because modern day helicopter setups and bell cranks and everything are really made that way, not like previous helicopters where they were not. All right, we're going to use the curves of the radio to get us our old school pitch setup, like I said, maybe -4, +9, and hover. All right, we'll use our curves for that. All right. So with that said, the first thing we want to do now is, now that we've got our heli set up for switchless, we're going to start setting up for old school. So the first thing we want to do is, let's talk about throttle curves. All right, right off the bat, your throttle curves are going to be linear. But in a old school setup, what you'll want is normal. You still want to bring the engine to idle. All right, so we're going to leave that 0. Here, instead of having instead of hover being 3/4, we want our motor power to be hover at center stick. So we're going to bring up, by the way, don't forget to separate all your curves, all right? Get them all separated, and don't forget to be also set up your conditions so you get normal, idle 1, and idle 2. You got to get all that set up. See my videos on the Aurora 9 for doing that. But separate your curves. So anyway, I digressed. We have low throttle. Now, I'm just going to use 3-point curves for demonstration. So if you want, let me get my face reflection out of here. If you want more points, go ahead and add them. Again, see my videos. So now what we want to do is, before, let's say on a switchless setup, let's say our throttle was here at hover. Well, we want to match that because we're hovering at center stick now. So let's just say, for number purposes, this is, oops, I hit reset. Just say for number purposes, again, you want to do this out in the field and use a tachometer. I don't know why my fat finger keeps hitting reset. You want to use a tachometer to get your head speed right. But let's just say, for demonstration purposes, that now we want to hover at center stick, and this is where our throttle is going to be at 75, and then, of course, 100% when you punch out with full pitch, all right? So, again, demonstration purposes. So this would be similar to an old school setup where you're hovering at center stick. You need your throttle to be up there much higher at center than on a switchless setup where you're hovering at 3/4, all right? So now, this is great for normal mode, taking off and whatnot. Okay, now we want to set up our idle 1 throttle curve, all right? So I'm going to go into idle 1. Remember, I separated my curves. And what we're going to want this time is, we're going to bring up that middle point to the same 75, all right, because we're really not changing anything there. Remember, idle 1s, we're still flying around upright. However, as I explained earlier, when we're in idle 1, we want an idle 1 curve, even in this old school setup, so when we're coming into the hover, our motor RPM does not drop too low. When I'm coming into the hover, transitioning from forward flight, I'm going to need some negative. I want my engine RPM dropping way down. So I'm going to set my low engine RPM to, say, I don't know, again, you'll use a tachometer or something here, get your head speed right. I'm just going to, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to say 40. So this might be my throttle curve for idle 1. So when I'm flying around and whatnot, and I want to come in for a landing from forward flight, my engine RPM isn't dropping too much, all right? Now for idle 2, basically, I'm going to want to set up the same thing. Now, I could have combined this to idle 2 so that I didn't have to make the change twice. You can do that if you want, but I'm just going to match these numbers. So 75 and 40, all right? So idle 2, same thing. I'm going to go to 75, and I'm going to bring this one to 40. So these are my throttle curves for, pardon me. So this is my throttle curves, example throttle curves for normal for taking off. Remember, we're talking about a nitro or even electric here. Idle 1 for flying around upright, and I will match that curve for idle 2 for when I go inverted, because I want the same throttle curves, all right? They don't really need to be that much different. So I'm basically set up my throttle curves now. Again, when you get this all set up, you're going to want to use attack and get your curves right. All right. If you're using a governor, then this won't be as critical. Watch some of my governor videos. It'll show you how to set throttle curves for a governor. It'll be about the same. Okay, so now we've got our throttle curves. All right. The next thing we need to do in an old school setup is set up our pitch curves, all right? So we'll go into the pitch curve menu, and we're going to do the same thing. Again, make sure you've separated all your pitch curves for now, and then we'll do that. So in a linear setup on switchless, hover was here, and that would be 0 pitch, as you see. This is 0 pitch, this would be full pitch, and this would be full negative. Well, that's not the old school setup. The old school setup is -4, roughly, hover, and full pitch. So what we want to do is bring up this low. As a matter of fact, I am going to combine these for now. So let me go into idle 2 and hit combine, and idle 2 and hit combine, because it'll just make it easier. So what we want to do is bring up the low point till my pitch gauge on the head says about -4. And I'm just going to make that 40 for now, all right? Let's just, this is an example. This number will be whatever. If your pitch gauge says -4 at 30, that's what it'll be. All right, now the next thing we need to know is, yes, we have now brought up, actually, let me reset this and put that point in there. All right, so I'm going to bring this back up to 40. Bear with, just to show you. So now we've got our low pitch, but look, center stick is still 0 pitch. We're going to want to bring that up to where we would be hovering at center stick. So I'm going to bring that up to say, I don't know, let's just make that 75. All right, so now we've got -4. We're hovering at about 75. Again, your pitch gauge will tell you this will be about 5-6 degrees on your pitch gauge for hover at center stick, and then of course full pitch, right? Now we want our idle 1 condition to be the same because we're going to be flying upright. So when I switch to idle 1, because I combined them, that will be the same. All right. So now I can go ahead and separate because in case I need to tweak anything, I don't want it. All right, now here's the trick. Remember, we're going to make idle 2 our invert switch. The first thing we need to do is get pitch reversed. So now you might say, well, all I got to do is bring this up here and bring this down here and I'm done. You not only got to reverse these ends, you also need to bring the hover down on the negative side. So remember, old school setup, this is -4, this is +9. Now when we hit the invert switch, we want -9 and +4. So we basically have to invert this pitch curve. So I'm in idle 2, I'm going to separate. All right. So let's just start with the first one. The first one is 40. We want the inverse of that. So this is center or 50. So this is 10 down. So I'm going to make this 60. All right. And that should give me the same amount of pitch, but in the negative or positive direction, because remember, this is +4 now. Now I'm going to go all the way to positive pitch, and this is full stick, and this is full pitch positive, but we now want full pitch negative. So I'm going to bring this all the way down to negative. And again, doing it this way, because we set up the helicopter in switchless mode, making these changes will automatically make the pitch ranges the same. Now you notice we got the center point. Well, we were at 75 for hover at center stick. Now we're inverted. We need the inverse of that, which would be 25. All right, so I'm going to make that 25. All right, so now we've got an exact inverse pitch curve. All right, so there we go. Now we've got the same pitch curve for negative, but the stick is reversed, then positive. See that as I switch between idle 1 and idle 2? Perfect. All right, so let's see it and let's show how that's actually going to work for pitch. So if you remember, the servo monitor is your friend. So I'm going to go into the servo monitor. Now in idle 1, let's say when I was done setting up my helicopter, I just so happened that all 3 of these servos, this is a CCPM helicopter, so 3 servos control the swash. At full stick, you'll see I've got a value, all in this direction. I'm in idle 1. Now watch what happens. I'm at full pitch, positive pitch. When I flip my invert switch now, because of my pitch curve, look what happened. it moved to the same value but in the negative range. Again, we set up our heli mechanically, so 0 was here. This way we know that pitch curve will give us exactly the same negative as positive when I flip the switch. That's what that pitch curve did for me. All right, so now if I go low stick, you'll see, all right, I'm in idle 1. You'll see I've only got a little bit of negative here, all right? But when I flip the switch, now I've only got a little bit of positive here. So it's exactly the inverse. Make sense? Exactly the inverse. All right, if I'm at the hover at center stick, there's how much positive I got, and I'm going to flip my inverse switch and go this side. Okay, as you see, we now have pitch reverse. Now, a word of caution here. This is for anybody trying this that has never done switched inverted before. Let's go into the pitch curve. When you go to flip this switch, do not be in the hover. Let me show you why. I'm in idle 1, and I've got all this positive pitch here. If I was in the hover and I flip this switch, I'm going to bury the helicopter into the ground because it just made a major pitch change, all right? The way old schoolers did this is they'd usually go into a loop or a roll, and when they're into the top of the loop, applying negative, see where my position is? Then they'd flip the switch. Now what this did is, watch what happens. You want this stick to be in about an area where when you flip the switch, you don't get a drastic pitch change. See, when I flip the switch, the point doesn't move, so my servos really don't jump on me. So as you're pulling the loop and you're coming into negative, that's when you'd flip this switch, and now you wouldn't get a huge pitch jump. All right? So that's kind of the old school setup for the throttle curves and your pitch curves and how to get idle 2 to reverse the pitch. All right, now that we're done with this segment, we're going to go into the more difficult part, which was how to get your elevator and rudder reversed.